Thank you, Nas. That was so beautiful. I was sitting there going, how can I make that work? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you. Happy Sabbath, everyone. Nice to see you. Autumn is my favourite time of the year for all the things Andrew just said before. Was it before? I don't know, the crisp air and you can have a doona at night and still wear a T-shirt in the day. It's perfect. Before I start this morning, I'd like to offer up a prayer, so if you'd like to pray with me. Father, thank you for the privilege it is to worship you and be here on your Sabbath, on your rest, with other people who also want to be with you. Lord, it's so beautiful that we can be a church family. And I ask today that you help me with what I have to share, and may it really touch just one person in this room today, even if it's just me. In your name, amen. Okay, so partway through today, you might go, if you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, by the end, you will know. So I'm hoping that we go okay today. Today I'm going to be talking about the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. But you will notice on that slide, there are some empty baskets. That is actually what I'm focusing on more. When we get our head around the 5 loaves and 2 fish, it's really our basket and what's in our basket. So I hope you go well with me today. Okay, if you know who this is, don't yell it out. But if you don't, this man's name is Dallas. Dallas is a real man, and I'm going to be sharing some of his story as I go through today. Dallas was an up-and-coming Hollywood producer. And he'd been slogging it out in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, for about 10 years. And he's a Christian, and he just felt like he couldn't get any further. And he got offered this great job in a really big church on the other side of America in Chicago, being their media production kind of person. Big budget with a bit of a promise of, increasing his productions. So they moved to Chicago. His first short film was produced just for his church, for a program. Another big shot producer actually saw it and got hold of it and basically went, here's lots of money. I want you to make another, like a Christian movie. Let's go for it. So Dallas's first big budget, big shot Christian film was a film called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. Has anyone seen it? It's kind of a light-hearted, boy comes back to God, meets a nice godly girl kind of story. So if you want to, you can take your time and do it. So everything was pointing to success for this movie, his first proper big budget Christian film. Then release weekend came out, and from the data on those kind of, premiere dates, they know exactly how the movie's going to go. It was a flop, a complete bombed out flop. So with that failure in the world's eyes, the funding and the money that had been thrown at him, and for another 5 years of 5 more movies of Christian films over the next 10 years, all of that money and funding and support evaporated because his first movie was a flop. And it was then January 2017 when this happened. Dallas spent the next day praying and crying with his wife and had some big questions. Where did I go wrong? I thought God was calling. I thought God was blessing. Wasn't this God's purpose for my production ministry? How can I reach people about Christ now? All those kind of questions. At one point of this really low day, he and his wife were reading their Bibles and praying, and his wife Amanda came to him, and she said that she really felt like God had impressed her with 2 things, and she didn't know what they meant, but she really felt like she had to share them with Dallas. And they were these 2 things. The first one was the story of the feeding of the 5,000. The second one was that God can do impossible math. They had no idea what this meant. So they spent the rest of that day studying and praying and reading their Bibles and going over and over the story of the feeding of the 5,000, the miracle. And as they studied, they kind of came up with a few ideas. And I'm going to use some of Dallas's ideas today, and I've also added in some of my own. The first one is this. Now, as we go through this, you can have your Bibles open if you want to, or I actually have them on the screen. And it's kind of going to be a little bit more like an interactive Bible study because I have the story parallel in the 4 Gospels. So you'll see each section is across Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So the first one was something that came up for them was that Jesus was trying to rest at the beginning of this story. Ness this morning mentioned that when Jesus went on to do things, he was always interrupted. And that's so true at the beginning of the feeding of the 5,000 because Jesus had pulled himself away, he had pulled the disciples away and said, let's rest a while. And then the crowds came and they were interrupted again. Have you ever tried to rest? I mean really rest, not just because you're tired and you need a nap or you need a proper 8 or 9 hours sleep, but rest from everything going on. For example, I think I have pulled out of Facebook about 5 times in my life and I've gone, nope, I don't want it anymore. And then I go back because it's become this common way of keeping in touch with your friends. So I go back and then it's too much and it overstimulates and overcrowds me and it's not healthy and I'll dump it again for another year and then I go back. You know, that kind of rest where you need space just to be with Jesus, just to be with yourself, be a human without so much stimulation. And I feel like this is where Jesus was at in this moment. He pulls and withdraws the disciples, withdraws himself, and they go and rest. Now, I'm not going to read through these every single time, so it'd be cool if you wanted to read them. And the points I'm making, I've tried to highlight. And I just love that, the parallel between the 4 Gospels and how they share it and how they point out the really important aspects and they kind of share that across them. The next part is that Jesus' rest is interrupted and he meets with the crowds. So then the crowds come. The Gospels tell us that Jesus welcomes them, that he heals them, that he meets with them. And in each Gospel you can see they pick up on something a little bit different. In Matthew, it says Jesus has compassion. In Mark, it says Jesus began to teach the people, and Luke is the one that mentions that he heals them. He goes to where they're at. He meets them where they're at, and he gives them what he has to help them. When you come across people who need your help, what do you do? I love how Ness this morning was the Good Samaritan. That was really cool. For me, I kind of go, even if I'm exhausted, what should I do? Or even if I don't feel like it or I'm not in the right headspace. I know you guys here at Ocean Shores, we just love how we've come in and you guys are such a serving community and that you keep going and keep working and keep serving because you feel like that's what God is calling you to do as a church. It's really inspiring. The next one is when the crowds get hungry. I want to focus on just a few things in this section. I want us to look at this as you read across and maybe on the highlighted bits that I've put in there. The people are hungry. The people have been out and they're hungry. But the next bit I want you to notice is that Jesus wasn't surprised that they were hungry. If you look across to John, you can see how he actually knew. He knew enough about them being hungry to test Philip. Or what are you going to do about it, Philip? And he knew that it would happen. He knew that it was too late to send them home. Jesus wasn't surprised that they were hungry. Now, if these people had been trying to follow him or for a few days or some for just that whole day or however they did it, anything they might have brought along with them for nourishment was probably all gone by now. In a way, could we even say that it was Jesus' fault that they were hungry? Jesus had kept them out. He kept talking, he kept preaching, he kept teaching, healing, and those people kept following and listening. Maybe his preaching caused them to be hungry in the first place. Is it possible that Jesus caused their hunger in this way to make the ensuing miracle that was about to come on, to make sure it was necessary? The only thing left to satisfy the hunger of all these people was a miracle. The disciples couldn't go back and buy food. They didn't have enough money. They were too far from town. The people couldn't walk home. They were too far away. They were hungry right now. I have a question for you. It's a question I've been asking myself. Rhetorical, you don't have to answer. Do you believe that God ever puts something in your path in order to show you his power? In order for you to need his power in your life. The next aspect I want to look at is that Jesus actually tells the disciples or instructs the disciples on jobs that they can do to solve this problem. Jesus doesn't perform the miracle straight away. He could have done anything he wanted. He could have just made food. He could have, even without making food, make everyone feel full and satisfied so they could just keep listening. But he didn't. He chose to ask the disciples to do some jobs. He had the disciples go and do all the jobs that they could do in their human power without his help. They went and they looked for food. They asked around. They did the job that Jesus asked them to do. Do you do the job that Jesus asks you to do, or do you expect him to do it all for you? In this section is when Andrew, one of the disciples, it tells us in the book of John, comes back and says that he found a boy with some loaves and fish. You'll see in the other Gospels that they don't actually mention the boy. Only John mentions the boy. I just believe, like we often skip over this, it's such an important part to play. And only John records it. The other three don't. Someone had baked that bread earlier and given it to their child. Someone had cooked the fish or cured it or however they prepared it, knowing it would feed their son on this day when he was going out to listen to Jesus. Jesus knew this. He knew that there was a parent or an auntie or someone in the background feeding and serving and looking after this child, and that would ultimately lead to looking after the more than 5,000 people. Even if that caregiver, the person who baked and prepared the food, had no idea at the time that what they were doing for their child was about to be used in a miracle. Jesus didn't need that parent to bake the meal for the miracle to happen. He didn't need his disciples to go and look for food for the miracle to happen, but he involved them in the miracle. He used them. He gave them a purpose and a place in the miracle that was about to follow. Do you ever doubt what you have to offer Jesus? The amount of money you have, the quality of your talents, maybe the time you have to contribute Do you offer Jesus all that you have and then you feel insecure and you start doubting yourself because you don't think it's enough compared to somebody else at church, somebody else down the road, somebody else who's way more successful than you? I want you to notice something in the Luke and John column on the screen. It's recorded here that the disciples came with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, so they did their job. They did exactly what Jesus asked them to do. But then what did they do? They doubted. The disciples did what Jesus asked. They presented this food that they found to him, and then they doubted if it would be enough. This isn't enough to feed all these people. This is all we have. We can't do anything for these people with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. But Jesus has them exactly where he wants them to be, right in this moment. The next section is that Jesus actually goes to his Father. He seeks God before he performs the miracle itself. So I want you to think about the progression as we go through this. Jesus has walked and talked and healed and ministered probably for days on end. And the people who are following him are tired and hungry. It's too late to go home. He involves his disciples in what they can do as humans in this experience. And somehow a parent or a caregiver in the background has been impressed to provide their child with sustenance for the day. Then Jesus gives thanks for it. Does he even need to give thanks? He orchestrated the whole situation, but he still goes to his Father and gives thanks. He looks to the heavens to seek his Father, and only then does he multiply those 5 loaves and 2 fish. Only then does Jesus perform the miracle, after he has made that connection with his Father. He then performs the miracle, and then, funnily enough, he gives the disciples more jobs to do. Jesus has asked the disciples to distribute the food to all the people as he's breaking it up. And the disciples were then part of that miracle again. The disciples are doing what they've been asked. They're doing what they can do in their human effort. But Jesus is involving them. Jesus is using them. They obey Jesus, but with their human capability, with what he has given them. Jesus had them do everything they could without needing him, except for the miracle part. So I want to share with you something that I've done. So some pretty amateur research that I've kind of put together. Might shock you, actually, but I'm going to share it anyway. So keep your shock to yourself. Nobody in this room performed a miracle yesterday. Put your hand up if you did. Nobody in this room performed a miracle in the last week. Or am I wrong? No one performed a miracle in the last month or year. As a side note, I'm more than happy if you think you have to chat later. All right. But in my research, here is a list of things that I found out that you have done in the last week or so. Put your hand up if you have done any of those things. Washed the dishes, gone fishing, Gav, that one was for you. Wrote emails or prayed. What about speaking on your phone, cooking food, buying food, practicing the piano, Danny, that was for you because you have to practice. Changing the oil in your car, feeding the dog, doing your homework. Actually, that one is a miracle at my house. Worked really hard. Watching TV, reading a book, reading your Bible, doing the laundry, making your bed, visiting a friend, helping someone, mowing the lawn, cleaning the church, organising the Sabbath school program, volunteering, or you made it to church today. These are the things that there is obviously an endless list, but these are the everyday things that I know that you guys have been doing this week, correct? No miracles in there, or are they? Maybe they are. I'm certain that the caregiver who baked those loaves and prepared those 2 fish did not know, did not realise that they were going to be part of something miraculous that day. But they clearly knew where their child was going and who he was listening to, and they wanted to encourage him to do that. And so they supported him in the only way they knew how, by providing food for his journey up and down the hill. What if your things that you do this week are miracles, but you don't even know? I want us to go back to our Hollywood producer, Dallas. I stopped the story at the part where he and his wife were doing their Bible studies on the feeding of the 5,000 and not really knowing why they should, but that his wife was impressed, so they did it anyway. That next morning at 4 a.m., Dallas was doing work, couldn't sleep, feeling like a failure. And a Facebook message popped up from someone he didn't even know on the other side of the world. The message says this: remember, your job is not to feed the 5,000, it's only to provide the loaves and the fish. For Dallas, this was a lightning bolt. His loaves and fish were his small, short films produced for his church. His loaves and fish now were letting go of some of those big dreams of being a proper big producer. His loaves and fish were just the talents that God gave him. His loaves and fish was now going to be giving up his pride and just keep on giving normal loaves and fish. Have you ever heard the saying, bloom where you're planted? Or grow where you've been planted? It's kind of like make the best of wherever you're at. You know, like you might be in a situation, but give that situation to God and make the best of whatever it is. I'm proposing this to be the next Christian version of bloom where you've been planted. Provide the loaves and fish. Whatever your loaves and fish are, that's all God wants from us. He wants us to use these in his name, but that's it. If the world judges us as being a success or a failure, that's up to the world, not us. What you have to offer is just between you and God. And whether God is going to feed the 5,000 with your loaves and fish, that's not up to us either. That is still only up to God. Once you hand over your offerings, your loaves and fish, they're now God's. They're for his use, for his purpose, his plan. After we give them to God, we've done our part. We've done that transaction, and the rest is up to him. After we share maybe something about God to a friend, the rest is up to him. After, like tomorrow at God's Wardrobe, we provide clothes for people who need them for their children. We're doing the transaction, and the rest is up to God. And I've heard some amazing stories about what happens when people come to God's Wardrobe. Same with the happy holiday hour things, like we provide the loaves and fishes. And then it's up to God how he does that, how he uses it. You do receive something back though. You receive that relationship with God. You receive the contentment and the peace that you are doing what God has asked you to do, the job that he has given you to do. Does anyone know the Dallas that I've been talking about today? Some people do. So his full name is Dallas Jenkins. And Dallas is the director of the Jesus series that came out early last year, which is kind of cool during COVID. The Chosen is the first biblically based account of Jesus produced in a series, not just like a one-off movie or something like that. So Dallas's story after this point keeps going, as you can imagine, and it says he went back to his church, willing now to just give his loaves and fish. He created another short film for a program at his church, didn't think much of it, put in a bit of work. I think it was on the birth of Christ. And it got in the hands of a streaming company called VidAngel. VidAngel was so excited about this short film he made. They obviously contact him. They get behind his desire to produce a series about Jesus. But guess what? They didn't have any money. All they had was loaves and fish. They didn't have money to throw behind it. So they decided to crowdsource or crowdfund the money to produce the first series of The Chosen. So you know when you might be on the internet and you have the GoFundMe, like things to raise money for something or this or that. So that crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, up until that time, I actually don't know what the world record limit was, but it was something like, I don't even know, $500,000 or something like that. They wanted to crowdfund the production of The Chosen, of this Jesus series. And Dallas was kind of like, that's not going to happen. They crowdfund it and they received over $10 million. And they produced series 1. And series 2 is currently started. I think they're up to about episode 4 or 5, and they currently do it on this pay-it-forward basis now, where if you watch an episode and you really appreciate it, you can choose to donate money, which then makes it more and more and more available. Does that make sense? So it's like this pay-it-forward program now. Remember back to when Dallas's wife felt impressed with those 2 points? The first one was the feeding of the 5,000 story. And the other one was that God can do impossible math. It kind of all sunk in. Might feel like I'm doing a bit of an advertisement for The Chosen. But I guess I'm sharing this because it really touched me. For some of you, I guess, who are more theologically inclined, if you watch The Chosen in the series, you might go, I'm not sure about that section, or did that really happen? But because of this show, it is now in every country of the world. And it has been translated into 50 different languages. Even Dallas Jenkins himself says that it's not a replacement for the gospel. It's not a replacement for the Bible. But in this day and age when people would rather sit down and watch like Netflix or TV rather than picking up their Bible, this is meeting people where they're at. So what if you feel like you don't have many loaves and fish? Maybe you do. What if your simple everyday kindness of inviting someone over for a cup of tea means that they're lived for another day? What if going out of your way to support your local service station instead of the big service centres keeps a family afloat? How do we even know that our loaves and fish aren't providing miracles for others? We may not make famous movies or series like Dallas Jenkins did, but we can offer our loaves and fish to God. This makes me, I guess, in turn, think about the disciples and how Jesus chose them, how he called them. I often, wonder, I guess, and we talk about them being everyday humans, and they were tax collectors, politicians, fishermen, religious leaders. But what was it about them that made them so special to Jesus that he chose them? So special that he called them to minister with him. And how could I actually be used by Jesus right now? There's so many questions. What were their loaves and fish? What did they have to bring to the table that Jesus saw? To finish off this morning, I'd like to show you a short video of when Jesus actually calls Matthew into ministry. Matthew is a tax collector, Matthew is Jewish but hated by the Jews because of how he works for the Romans. I want you to notice a few things before I play the video. I want you to see that Jesus sees Matthew for who he really is. Thank you. You did that. Jesus knows what Matthew's loaves and fishes or talents are. He already sees him. Other people don't think that Jesus should be choosing Matthew. This is the world putting their success or failure on Matthew. They don't think Jesus should call him. There are other people you'll see in the video who do think Jesus should call him, who do see his value. And I want you to notice Matthew's humbleness in when he accepts the call. It is so beautiful. We're going to watch, and yes, this is from Dallas Jenkins, The Chosen. All right.
We live in the same world, Matthew.
Next.
Besides, what else are you going to do with a mind like yours?
Matthew. Matthew, son of Alphaeus.
Yes.
Follow me.
Me?
Yes, you.
Whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing? You want me to join you?
Keep moving, street preacher.
Do you have any idea what this guy has done? Do you even know him?
Yes.
Listen, I said to... What are you doing? Where do you think you're going?
Guys, let me go.
Have you lost your mind? You have money. Quintus protects you. No Jew lives as good as you. You're gonna throw it all away.
Yes.
I don't get it.
You didn't get it when I chose you either.
But this is different. I'm not a tax collector.
Get used to different. I'm glad we passed by your booth today, Matthew.
Yes.
Shall we? We have a celebration to prepare for.
You will regret this, Matthew.
What's the tablet for? I grabbed it without thinking. You can put it back.
No, keep it. You may yet find use for it.
Where are we going?
A dinner party.
I'm not welcome at dinner parties.
Well, that's not going to be a problem tonight. You're the host.
Doesn't it just touch you? It did for me. It's like even the symbolism, Matthew in that, obviously in the production, he's carrying his little notebook and Jesus says, why do you have that? And he said, I grabbed it without thinking. Do you want me to put it back? And Jesus says, no, don't put it back. It might come in useful. Another loaf and fish. I dare you today to put yourself in Matthew's position. Offer your loaves and fishes to the one who can perform miracles with them. Do not worry about what other people think or if the world thinks it's your success or a failure. It's only about what Jesus thinks, what's between you and him. And let him do the rest.